Hi everybody, welcome to 5-Minute Ministries. There were two men involved in a business deal. One was selling property and one was going to buy the property. And the seller took a crew of men and the buyer off to the place where they were going to make the deal. And the seller told the buyer that he has 6 hours to mark off the border of his property. He can make it as big or as small as he wishes, but it must be completed in 6 hours. So the time began, and the buyer starts marking off his property with the shovel, and he has it timed out to where he can make it as large as he can possibly make it within 6 hours. And he trudges along, and it comes time where the end of the 6 hours is up, and he has a few minutes left, and the gap is only 10 foot wide. If he completes the 10-foot wide gap, he will have as big a property as he possibly can. And the crew and even the seller, they're cheering him on, say, "You can make it, go, go, go." But the buyer starts to shake and tremble. And the buyer falls to one knee, and he's still shaking. The buyer finally slumps to the ground. And the crew goes over to examine him, and they find that he had died. So the crew take his shovel and the shovels they brought with them, and they made a 6 by 6 foot hole, and they buried him. Now the name of this story is, How Much Land Does a Man Need? Now I've heard it many years in school, and it goes right along with the subject matter I've been talking about, that more is less. And of course, the whole idea is this man went out of his way to get as much as possible, only to die in the end. Many people have that mentality to get as much as possible. The problem is, sometimes the stuff goes without you. Sometimes the stuff gets stolen, gets broken, gets thrown away, gets burned up in a fire or whatever. And sometimes you leave the stuff. The stuff may be there, but you die and you no longer have the stuff. It will belong to someone else. Jesus also spoke a parable about this in Luke 12, and it's titled The Rich Fool. Well, the man has so much abundance of crops, they cannot fit into his barns. So he says to himself, well, I will tear down my barns and I will build bigger barns. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have an abundance for many years. Sit back, eat, drink, and be merry. And God tells him, you fool. Don't you know that your soul is required of you tonight? And tomorrow, to whom will your things belong? So we take for granted, we spend all of our lives trying to get this stuff, only to leave it behind. It certainly cannot go with us, even though some people wanted to or even tried, like the ancient pharaohs, buried all their stuff with it. Now, to whom do these things belong? They belong to your children, which, yes, you should provide for your children when you're gone. But in a lot of cases, especially with abundance of stuff, the children fight over it. Or the people you're leaving it to will fight over it. They'll go to court, they'll argue, they'll yell and scream. They'll have all kinds of issues because you left them stuff. Stuff does not build families. Stuff does not build a life. And you cannot spend your entire life trying to get stuff. We see the futility of the pursuit of more. Again, with the right context and the right priorities, more is not a problem. It's the pursuit of more. It's the greed behind it that is the problem. How much does a man need? He certainly does not need very much. How much does a man want? He wants everything. Some people want the world, and they try to get it, and they find their efforts are worthless and useless. If you read Ecclesiastes, you'll see that the richest man who ever lived, as they say, or at least especially at the time, King Solomon. He had everything he could possibly want, and he said it's all worthless. There are many interviews with people who have everything today, and they say it's worthless. This means nothing. As I said in previous messages, some people will lose everything trying to gain everything. So we must be really careful in our pursuit of more. And we must really take into account what's going to happen to this when I am gone. This has been 5-Minute Ministries, and I'll see you next time.